Welcome to Creating Connection within Health and Wellness
with your host, Demi
and Kirsty,
where we connect and share our perspectives and experiences within the health and wellness industry.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Creating Connection in Health and Wellness with your host, Kirsty and the beautiful Demi. We are here with episode 8, and this episode we are discussing all things habits. So within this episode, we're going to discuss what is a habit. We're also going to be discussing how habits are created and how you can stick with them for life. And then also we're also going to be discussing why people don't succeed when they're trying to change their habits as well. So we thought we'd get started with a fun fact. Did you know that it actually takes on average 66 days to build a habit that sticks with you, right? So this is on average. So we're actually going to be touching on this in today's episode, but first things first, we thought we would discuss in terms of, sort of the purpose of this episode for today. It is around the fact that, one of the things is that we want to be able to equip you with the tools to be able to create sustainable habits for yourself, because at the end of the day, that's how we begin to change our life in that aspect and become that person that we desire to be. Also in the terms as well is that, when we speak to things around, when we've set ourselves the intention to do something and we don't actually follow through with it, here's how we can create a negative effect in terms of the trust within yourself and also the belief within yourself. So it's really important to understand that the more consistent we can stay with something, the more confidence and the more self-belief you will have. So we really want that to be an awesome outcome for today. So I think before we get started, what is a habit? If you'd like to take it away, Demi.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for that intro, Kirsty. It is absolutely vital for your self-esteem, the ability to be able to capitalize on the things that you say you're going to do. So many of us have had the experience where we've tried to create a new habit, potentially haven't been successful, and then, felt maybe not felt as empowered as what you probably would have if you were able to keep that habit alive. So today's all about that. So first things first is actually understanding what a habit is. So a habit is an automatic action that has become unconscious. So essentially it means that we can do this on autopilot. So it doesn't require a lot of self-discipline after time, and it also doesn't require a lot of intentional effort. So the ranges can be anywhere from 18 to 254 days for it to actually become an automatic action. Okay, but on average it's 66 days, like Kirsty was saying before. So it's a little bit more of a wide range rather than just like, 21 days to create a new habit, like we've all heard before. So it's a process for you doing something that actually becomes automatic and part of your life. So habits make up what we do in our general day-to-day living. So might look like things like brushing your teeth, how you tie your shoelaces, brushing the way you brush your hair, really little things like that. That's what we're talking about as essentially habits. First thing we're going to touch on is how we actually create habits. So first by thinking, then by doing and being. So it's knowledge, practice, and integration. So we first start by looking at who do we want to be. So a feedback loop then occurs. So it's a cue, craving, response, and reward. So let's break that down a little bit further, Kirsty, when we're talking about knowledge, practice, and integration and who you want to be. Let's sort of expand on that because I think it's really, really important. It's also going to bring us in the full circle to one of the other topics we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Absolutely. Honestly, it comes down to the biggest thing is like, we'll start on that first point where it's like, who do you want to be? When it comes to habit creation or anything we want to implement into our life, we have to get really clear and see that whatever that action is that we're doing or we're learning about, does that align with who you are now or who you want to be? So that's why it's like, it's so important to get really, really clear on that. So it's like, if you're thinking about a habit that, for example, that you want to implement into your life, just to say, going to the gym as per se, right? And you're like, cool, I want to become that person that goes to the gym 3 times per week. And it's like, well, is the current person you're doing now doing the habits around that will get you to the gym? Yeah. Or who do you need to become that person that goes 3 times per week, right? So it starts off with like getting really clear on who you want to be, right? So that's the questions there. That's the question you would ask yourself. It's like, who do you want to start showing up as, right? What does this person do? Yeah. This leads into like the process of thinking, doing, and being. So the knowledge, the practice, the integration, right? So with anything that we do, right? So you're understanding that process where we've got, it can take anywhere between 18 to 254 days to instill a habit, right? So within this, it's like we have the knowledge phase. We understand, we learn, what is this thing we're learning about? Then we have the practice. So we put it into play, right? We start practicing it. This is where those days, we accumulate it. We're putting those points every single day to be that person that we desire to be. And then it becomes who we are. So that's the integration phase. And you can use within that when you're implementing new habits, it's like, okay, cool, pause and reflect, refine what do we need to adjust to continue the success, or what do we need to pull back on to make it even more successful as well, because it's okay to take a few steps back to realign and go forward. So that's sort of what it leads into, like that process of the knowledge, practice, integration. It's essentially thinking, doing, and being, because it's like you're thinking about the thing, you do the thing, and you apply the knowledge that so it's meshing it together, and then it becomes who you are. So is there anything you'd like to add to that too?
Yeah, no, I think you summed that up really, really well. It's really about, like you said, starting with who you want to be and starting to show up as that person. You don't have to do all the things at once, which is probably what I would add. It's slowly starting to integrate these new behaviors that are going to be reflective of that person you want to be in 6 months or 12 months time. And I often try and think about this in a way of like, when I am developing any new type of practice, you really have to have a why behind it. You have to understand what you have to sort of have an understanding of what are you trying to achieve with this new behavior or with this new habit. And then once you understand that, you know what value it's going to add to your life, which then is a positive feedback loop to, that's essentially the reward that you get. But with that positive feedback loop, that's what continues that behavior and creates it as an automatic action that you do every day. So having that sort of knowledge, like you said, first you have the knowledge that you need to kind of like make some changes, and then looking at what is the type of person that I want to be. And when I behave in the way that I'm currently behaving, does that reflect who I want to be in 6 months, 12 months? Because essentially we also need to think about not just who we want to be necessarily tomorrow, but who we want to be in, 254 days from now. So 6 to 12 months away. When we start to implement these things now, then we start to see the dividends and the rewards 254 days or 12 months from now. So really important that when you start to develop a new habit, you're also in understanding that you need to sort of detach yourself from instant gratification outside of patting yourself on the back and creating positive self-esteem from actually doing the thing. Yeah, that's pretty much the only, that's not a blanket cover. That's not a black and white statement, but it is going to be the primary reward that you will get is the positive feedback loop from actually doing the action. But say, for example, if you go for a walk one morning, you're not necessarily going to see the physical benefits from doing that instantly as much as what you will compounding over time in 12 months from now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the little thing. It's like noticing those sort of things and being aware within that knowledge stage where it's like things don't happen overnight, but it's like, where are the things that you can hone in on and focus that reward response in terms of that, which we'll discuss how the feedback loop works shortly. But in terms of like, instead of focusing on like, if there's physical changes, which do take time to compound over time, how does it feel to accomplish something that you set yourself out to do? Focusing on those little things where it's like, we can focus on how we feel in those moments where we've got those things and we're ticking those things off and we're like, cool, you know what? Every single day that I'm doing something, I'm becoming that person I desire to be. And something that I do for myself personally, when we speak about these, whenever I change, we're speaking about like projecting into the future. I always think to myself, what would this future version Kirsty do? Like, so to say, for example, healthy version, what would this healthy version of me do? Or whatever I envision. And I always ask this, like, if I come to like a crossroad, like a pickle, which like a big pickle, because they happen in our life. But if I always do that and I'm like, I catch myself in that moment, this is why awareness comes into play and like that self-observation. But it's like, I catch myself, I'm like, what would future Kirsty do in this moment? Would this be something that she would do or not so much? And that's something else is might be helpful in that aspect. It's like kind of talking to yourself and being your pep talker. And it's like, what would Kirsty do? Like, what should I be yourself?
Yeah, 100%. And that's something to be said about when you are, because we've all had these moments where we're like, I know I should do that thing, but I don't feel like doing it. And it might be the new habit that you're kind of trying to create, or that new action that you're implementing into your daily morning routine, whatever it is. I get this sometimes with my dry brushing routine because I've started that again. And so every now and then I jump out the shower and I'm like, oh. But then it's like, that's when that internal dialogue comes along, and it's the self-awareness that goes, okay, well, what would future Demi do? Or what would, the higher version of myself, does she dry brush every day? Yes, she does. Okay, so if I skip it today, then I'm not essentially embodying that version of myself that I want to be. So I'm like, okay, get the brush, and it's right there in front of me. So it's purely just me, having an adverse reaction to, like, it's a bit of an internal thing. And then I start to reflect, why do I have that little part of me that doesn't want to do the thing, even though it's so easy and it's right there? I made it super easy for myself. The dry brush is right next to my toothbrush, so I can't miss it. But I still don't want to spend that 2 minutes doing it. So that's that internal dialogue, and sometimes the internal battle that people have with themselves over habits. And it's like, it's right there. You can quite easily do it, but sometimes you still choose not to do the thing, even though you should. So there's some internal sort of prompts that you could use, like Kirsty mentioned, was this higher version of myself, or this better version of myself that I want to become. Does that version of me do this? Is that an automatic habit? And if the answer is yes, then that's where, you choose that different path, that fork in the road, and you go, okay, well, last time I probably would have gone, fuck it, I'm too lazy, I don't want to do it, doesn't matter. Or this time you're going to go, no, it matters, and it's building me into a better person, so I'm going to go this way instead. For those of you that are listening, I'm actually forking the road.
Yes.
If you're watching on YouTube, you might be maybe one of the only ones, but yeah, forking the road.
But it's so important. Like, it is those sort of things, and that sort of leads us into our feedback loop, and understanding, that cue, craving, response, and reward sort of thing. Because, everything that we do in our life and our day-to-day, and taking everything with our sensory in terms of that, like, is always on a feedback loop, right? We get a cue, we get a craving, we get a response, we get a reward. So an example of this, as a habit, is one that's an automatic one, which I feel is probably very automatic for a lot of us, and which you have to make a conscious effort to change, is that, cue, craving, response, reward can happen with our phone. So an example is like, the cue is your phone goes off. The craving is, oh, I want to know what that notification says. The response is, I pick up my phone and look at that phone. And the reward is, oh, I get that satisfaction by opening my phone. Yeah. So that's an example of how that feedback loop can work. And when you start to sort of understand that knowledge, you can start to look at those and bring awareness to the automatic actions you do throughout your day. And you're like, okay, well, this is the reward I'm getting, whether it feels good or not, because at the end of the day, we're always getting something out of anything we do. Take a few steps back, zoom out and look at it and go, okay, what was the response? What was my steps before this? And this is how we build that awareness within ourselves to go, okay, I'm getting here, but how did I get there? And it's like, that's how we can do those consistent sort of like U-turns inwards to sort of have a look and go, okay, cool. What is that feedback loop, whether it's a good habit or a bad habit as per se. So we'll discuss a bit later in terms of, some tips around, building some really good habits and not so, and breaking some bad ones too, which, we're going to go into our next topic around, why people don't succeed at trying to change their habits. Because, chances are, if you are listening to this call, whether you're really good at implementing habits or not so much, we're going to discuss in terms of a few different points that we've noticed within ourselves, our own journeys with clients, through our learnings, through everything, in terms of, the challenges of where people do, not succeed in terms of building those habits, which can be really detrimental. And like we were discussing before, in terms of our self-belief, our self-confidence, changing our life for the better, right? In terms of those things, feeling like relationships, everything. Yeah. And it's like, and then, we get that feeling where we can't change and it's just who we are. I'm just going to tell you right now, you can change if you want to change. It's just about how you do it. So it's like, one of the first tip we'll discuss in terms of this is something that I notice with everyone, and I've lived this myself, and something was a humble learning lesson, which I now do things at a very different pace, is going way too big, way too quick. And you know, what I mean by this is like, you know, we want this thing, right? And we're here. And I want to be the person that goes to the gym 5 days a week and eats clean every single day. And, you know, I'm waking up every single morning. I've got a 5 a.m. perfect routine. And I'm like, that's it. Tomorrow I'm doing it all. And I'm becoming that person. And I go really well for a week. And then next week I'm really tired because I'm burnt out. And I'm like,
so much effort.
I'm like, holy shit. Like, is this what it's like to be healthy? I'm like, no, can't do it. I'm doing the same. And then you're like, okay, that's a personal dialogue from me like 5 years ago. So, you know, you can look for that if you want to, but I'm going to do all the things and I'm becoming, and like, great intentions. I love it. But the problem is with those sort of things, and the problem with that method of doing things, which is pretty much like our whole culture of wanting to get there now, is that, first of all, it takes groundwork to get there. If we think about the things in terms of, you know, building a habit can take up to 254 days for it to stick. That's another thing. It's like, are you going to do that, all of those things for 254 days straight without, you know, managing energy or anything like that? Number 3 is that it leads into the energy. It's like, you know, there comes a point that what goes up must come down. And if we go way too high too quick, we crash and burn really quick. So that's why small, steady, you know, slower is faster, as we've learned that term in our life. It's, you know, gradual pace, you know, reflect, sit back, refine, all these sort of things, and go at the pace what feels challenging just enough for ourselves, that is still creating that change, but it's not putting our life and turning it upside down, essentially, aspect, which is really, really important. So that's sort of the first point, is what we've sort of noticed in terms of, you know, trying to change their habits and not succeeding. It's because, you know, you try to be that person 100 wholeheartedly % straight away, which the intentions are so pure and wholesome. Never ever let go of those. You know, you got to have that, you got to have that. But at the same time, it's like, you know, we're going to speak about the strategy on how to get to that as well at the end. But in terms of that, you know, it's like, don't go too hard too quick. Life is not a race. You know, you will get there. It's much better for you to go consistently over time, steadily, than for you to stop and start and repeat the toxic cycle over and over again, when you could become successful in the long term and keep it that way. So that's the first point anyways.
I would 100% agree. And just adding to that a little bit is that essentially, like, when you go too big too quick, and then you don't succeed, you're creating a negative relationship with that thing that you're doing, right? So often with clients, I'll try and encourage them, hey, we need to create a positive experience with this thing that you're trying to do. So, and I've spoken about this before on a podcast. An example would be a client that I recently had, where she's like, okay, my new habit is that I want to track my food every single day. And I was like, cool, I love the ambition behind what you want to do. But right now, with where you're at, you've never tracked food before, and you currently still don't know how. We're about to start teaching you that process. So setting the goal now to track every single day and everything that you eat is way too aggressive, and you're probably going to set yourself up to be unsuccessful. And that's just me being real, not me trying to sort of put her down or anything. It's just me saying, hey, let's move a different way with this. Instead of putting the expectation on yourself first, start to track every single day. How about let's get you to log into the app every day? Simple. You don't have to track anything, but you're doing the first 30 seconds of what that new habit is going to be. That first 30 seconds, cool. I've opened it up. After breakfast, maybe, oh, sweet, I'll log in my breakfast. And before I know it, I've gone a whole week and I've logged my breakfast every day because I've logged in. And it's not as daunting as trying to track every single thing every single day. So changing too many things at once, going too big, too quick, they're the things that are going to potentially set you up for failure initially in the beginning. So when you start to sort of break them down and simplify them to make them really easy to achieve, you're creating a really positive experience with that thing, and you go, fuck yeah, I'm good at this. And then you keep going. It's that feedback loop, right? So that's a really, really important one. Whatever you're thinking you want to do, try and simplify it down by like, divide it by 4 and start there. Like 25% of that habit that you want, Start with just the first 25%. The first 2 minutes of that habit, do that. Like James Clear talks about it in his book, Atomic Habits, where he's like, okay, if you want to be someone that regularly goes for runs, just put your shoes on, running shoes on every day. Do the first 2 minutes. And then before you know it, you'll have walked to the front door. And then, before you know it, you'll have gone for a run 4 times in the week rather than none, and that's progressing you towards that habit of being someone that runs daily. So that's a really, really good example. And I love the example you used of your phone before with like the cues and everything like that. It's like, yeah, there's so many things that you can start to identify as habits that aren't serving your purpose too. So it'll be exciting to get into that. But the next sort of point that we would cover in terms of another reason why people might be unsuccessful with developing new habits is doing things for the first time and expecting to get it right straight away, which is very similar to what we mentioned before when it comes down to like, think about what you're doing now and the benefit that you'll get in terms of compounding results in 12 months from now, not the result that it's going to get you in that immediate moment, because it's likely that you're not going to necessarily see immediate results straight away, right? And this is a little bit dependent on the type of action that you're doing. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to implement brushing your teeth twice a day instead of just once, like this, maybe some people listening to this might be like, that's gross, you always brush your teeth twice a day. But some people might be listening to this and they only brush them once. But for example, really silly example, if you're going to brush your teeth, start implementing brushing your teeth twice a day. Obviously, you're going to see the benefit of brushing your teeth instantly after, because you're going to feel clean teeth, and that's great. But the long-term effects of better mouth hygiene is going to be compounding over time. So, we're in it for the long run, not just like that instant result, because the long run compounding over time is going to be a bigger result. It's going to be the bigger overall life-changing experience that we're after.
100%. I love that example. And, adding into that, in terms of like doing the things a few times and expecting it to get it right straight away. This is where it's sort of like, you need to give yourself permission to not get it right. You're like, you need to give yourself permission to go, you know what, I'm in a learning phase. See, people we've got this perfectionism sort of persona umbrella over every single person in this world. I feel I've been trapped under it. I'm sure you have too, Demi, where it's like, we need to expect to be this sort of certain thing. And it's like, when you give yourself permission to say, you know what, I'm learning, I've got my student hat on and I've got my doing hat on and I've got all the hats on, and you're like doing the thing, well, not all the hats, but like, you're like, at least you give yourself permission to be that student where it's like, I'm not going to get it right this time, maybe not, or I'm going to ask help if I need it too. So in those sort of respects and that thing. So it is really important to sort of give yourself permission for that, because I feel like as soon as you give yourself permission to sort of, okay, you know what, I'm going to get it right as best as I can until it becomes something that is awesome.
Yeah.
It kind of takes off that pressure too, because you're kind of like, oh God, the weight lifted off the shoulders. And you're like, I don't have to be perfect. How good.
Yeah. Exactly. And this is why I often like, for something as simple as implementing a new cardio, like a daily movement practice into clients' training regimes. And some coaches might think it's a little bit aggressive to like do this every day, but I would much rather start a client on a really small dose of daily exercise, and a low intensity dose of daily exercise, rather than 4 sessions of 45 minutes. And this is not every single client, but if I'm trying to get a client to increase their step count or get 30 minutes of cardio in every day, I'd much rather start them with a 15-minute walk every single day, because even if they don't get it done for every single day of the week, they might get it done 3 or 4 times, and that's more than what they were doing before. But if I'm saying to them, there's no expectation on what days you do this, but if you can try and get it done every single day, that's amazing. And something like a walk, that's not going to be detrimental to their physical health in any way. It's not overtraining them. If anything, it's going to be positive for their mental health and also their cardiovascular health, their recovery, lots of benefits to doing it that way. And it's implementing a really low-hanging fruit. There's a daily practice of them looking after themselves, so they feel accomplished faster, right? So it's like, I try and get clients to do smaller amounts, but more frequently, especially when it comes to doing something that's changing their life, like going from someone that's completely sedentary and not in the habit of walking daily to trying to get them active every day.
Exactly. Yes, exactly right. And then we just got to layer upon that. And that's what we
yeah, totally. And then you just layer upon that. They might not need to go for a 15-minute walk every single day for the rest of their life, but at least, you know, then when it comes to them going on holidays, they can revert back to, oh, okay, cool. I just need to make sure that I find some way of moving my body in whatever way feels good for me. And it's not, you know, completely changing, you know, it keeps them moving in the right direction towards a positive, healthy lifestyle. So yeah, they're the reasons why it's just so beneficial.
100%, 100%. I was having a reflection call with one of my clients the other day, and she said, like, it's so interesting. We've just finished, well, we're not finished, but we've just hit a 20-week mark together. And she was like, it's so interesting, Kirsty, because we started off very small in terms similar sort of along those lines. And she's like, now it's just effortless. It's just who I am. And see, that's where people, that's what you essentially want. Anything that you're doing is that one day it becomes who you are, you know, and sort of, that leads into our next point in terms of like, you know, choose habits that actually align with who you want to be.
Yeah.
You know,
identity-based habits.
Identity-based habits. And it's like, you know, don't just do something because, you know, someone on Instagram is doing it and you feel like that's how you be that person in this life and you show up in this world. It's like, you know, truly sitting back and reflecting and do the things and try them out. But it's also like, you know, sitting back and going, does this align with who I am, or am I just doing it because everyone else is sort of doing it?
Yeah, know the why and understand how it's going to be beneficial to your life and who you actually want to be. And we spoke about this a little bit. The example that we want to use for this specific podcast is meditation. So often people will think of meditation as a habit that is quite hard to achieve. Like, a lot of people struggle with us, and we kind of are able to identify that that's often just because it's uncomfortable to sit with your own thoughts. It's uncomfortable to slow down in the world that we live in today. So, you know, trying something like meditation as a new habit, if it's completely left of field for you and thinking, why can't I get this right? What's wrong with me? It's probably because that habit itself doesn't actually align or fulfill what you want, right? So we then go back to the drawing board and look at how can we get that same benefit without necessarily having to do that exact action. Right? Because meditation might not be, well, meditation is beneficial for every single human on this earth. There's no doubt about it. We know that it is helpful for people's mental and physical health to meditate or take time to be still. But it's not necessarily something that everyone can wrap their head around. So we spoke before about a couple of different ways that you can implement that same stillness in a slightly more achievable way for someone. So it's like sitting down and trying to commit to 20 minutes of meditation a day when you're someone that's typically quite fast paced and doesn't like to sit with your own thoughts. That's going to feel like an incredibly hard task for you, and you're probably not going to be successful at it. So then there's other ways that you can try and implement that same stillness, or try and, you know, recreate the action to get the same benefit. So something that I've told many clients of mine to do that, you know, just cannot wrap their head around, like sitting down intentionally to meditate, is, you know, when you take your shower in the evening, use that as an opportunity to actually intentionally slow down. So it's taking intentional time to slow down your thoughts, or to sit with your thoughts, or to observe your thoughts, to connect with your breath, to connect with your body, and get the added benefit of that rest-like state. So the example that I use for my clients is like using a hot shower in the evening, taking that time, slow down your breath, use it as an opportunity to intentionally relax, rather than jumping in the shower, washing yourself, washing your hair, and going out, cooking the kids dinner and all that sort of stuff. Like, push a shower to later in the night and then use that as your opportunity. So that's a way that you've recreated a habit, not just done something because other people are doing it and they're getting benefits from it, and you think you need to, even though it's really quite hard for you to actually do that. Recreate it in another way.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the coolest thing, is that because at the end of the day, we're the creator of our own lives. So we can modify things to suit ourselves in our life. And, you know, another way that you can potentially do it, like for, you know, for myself, I'll use myself as an example because I've lived it. But in terms of this, like with meditation, I actually found a lot of resistance to this even like 2 years ago. right? And now I can, I physically meditate the first thing as soon as I get out of the morning, 1 hour a day, every day.
Oh, wow.
So
I love that.
it is good, but it's a practice, right? So,
Yeah.
but I also, you know, for example, when we start with these things, right? I started off trying to go really hard, really quick a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't like this. I can't sit still. So for myself, I love movement. So I started off doing like mindful movements in terms of that. And, you know, in terms of this sort of just taking that time to be with myself, not listening to music, sort of things like that. And then over time, when I was like, okay, cool, now I'm ready to sort of sit. And then it moved into like 1 minute a day. Then it moved into, after a few weeks, it moved into 5 minutes. And I didn't go over that because I was like, no, I just want to be that person that masters that art of showing up in terms of those things. And then now it's like, it's just part of who I am. And I love it because it gives me that chance to sort of slow down. So it's like when you're looking at something, whether you're trying to implement anything into your life, you know, it's important to understand that, you know, yes, you want it to align with who you want to be. Initially, there's always going to be resistance to something. So it's really so important about how you do start. And, you know, that sort of like, you know, it's really, it's just important to start small, start gradually and modify it ever so slightly to suit you and your lifestyle. You know, like I made that up in terms that, you know, I'd go for a walk or, you know, whatever it might be, or I'll get on my bike or go for a bike ride or, you know, even just anything, like just starting to sort of do those sort of things, because it's like, I didn't make that up in whole general, but I mean, for myself, I modified that.
Yeah. You just sort of made up what felt right for you.
Yeah. And then that's the coolest thing, because we get to create our own sort of thing. As long as it's still in line with those things and you're like, cool, this is what I'm working towards, that outcome, you know, at the end of the day, there's no real rules in that aspect. So that's what I'm going to say.
100%. And adding to that is like you said, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do. And even when you do modify it into the smallest task, you are still going to find resistance because your system is currently safe with where it's at right now. And changing is going to be something that can be confronting. And usually that is the big overarching reason why people are unsuccessful at changing habits, is because that change in itself is confronting. The system's like, no, this is not what we're used to. This is different. We don't necessarily like it yet, but we have to find a way to create safety in that new action and that new behavior and even that new way of thinking. So really important thing to remember there is that we just need to make sure that you're eventually creating safety in that process. Yeah. So if you don't, then you're potentially going to continue finding that there's going to be resistance. So when you find resistance on a new habit, you go, okay, I'm experiencing resistance. Why is this showing up for me? And how can I sort of like redirect how I'm feeling? How can I change the dialogue around it? Why do I feel like this is something I don't want to do? Is it actually an issue with the thing that I'm doing, or is it just my system trying to keep me safe and not change because change is uncomfortable, right? So yeah, you'll end up learning so much about yourself when you start to identify these things. So yeah, we'll wrap it up real quick, but I think we could probably even do one for like practical tools on how to, like we might even do a part 2 and go how to create new habits in terms of like, because we've done a lot of like what habits are, why people might not necessarily succeed at changing things in their life in general. But then, you know, diving in deep to how to create new ones, actually how to implement them and, you know, outside of obviously just adjusting them to suit where you're at, but then, you know, the actual practicality of implementing those things into your daily routines.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do a part 2 on that. And we'll leave you with a little thing that you can take away with for today around, you know, breaking those bad habits, if you want to call it that. I don't know. I don't like to call it bad, but call them those habits that don't align with who you want to be.
They don't serve you.
They don't serve you, right? So we can leave you with a little thing that you can do to start putting some things into action, you know, start to bring that awareness and all those sort of things to yourself. Is one, you know, if we want to change a habit, right, we just got to change the course of a habit. I always like to think about habits as like an automatic program that's sort of running on autopilot all the time. For us to be able to change that course, you know, that train track, like that fork on the road, we'll sort of discuss before. If we got the tracks going this way, we want to go that way, we're going to catch ourselves. So it's like sort of like, you know, you notice the habit of whatever it is that you're doing before you fully complete that feedback loop, that loop that's happening. Catch yourself. No, change. This is not aligning with who I want to be, whatever the dialogue you need to do. and then see if that changes, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but
Yeah.
every single time that you catch yourself doing that and you change the path ever so slightly from the automatic path, that there will compound like a habit over time to change that path and create a different outcome. So
yeah, totally. It will literally, it's like when you've got a picture of connect the dots, and you've connected the dots so many times in the same way. That line that you've drawn between the dots is like the neurons in your brain. And that line is so thick and so strong and so robust. All you need to do is catch yourself connecting those dots at some point in the path, connect a couple of different dots. And the more times you do that, you will strengthen a different behavior pattern and a new way of thinking. And then when those neurons start to get even more connected in your brain, that's when it starts to become a little bit more of an automatic behavioral pattern for you, and you will see the change. And you can do this even just with your thoughts as well. One thing that we often work with clients when it comes to this is mindless consumption, or I'll put inverted commas like mindless consumption, because it's an automatic behavior. Whatever, I've got clients that might be working from home, and 1 minute they're typing on the computer, and then 2 seconds later they're standing in front of the cupboard and they don't even know how they got there. It's like something in the brain went, we need a distraction, and that was the behavioral pattern that got them out of that current situation that they were in. So it's like creating awareness around that, and then going, okay, so yesterday I reached in and I grabbed some food and I snacked on it, and then I felt shit after. So that became an automatic habit for me, and I've been doing that quite a bit lately. So connecting the different dot today, I'm actually going to just close the cupboard. And it doesn't matter that you made it to the cupboard. It's just that you chose a different path when you got there, right? And then before you know it, you'll start to pick up on yourself typing away at your computer and feeling the urge to go to the cupboard. And you go, no, I'm not even going to go to that damn cupboard today, because I know where that leads me. So they're really like classic examples of things that we work with clients in a day-to-day practice that you can start to become aware of. But like Kirsty said, if you don't become aware of them and catch yourself, you probably it's going to be so much harder for you to identify that these things are even happening.
100%. Awareness is the first key. You got to start looking at yourself, no matter how uncomfortable, on a big old mirror, and you got to go, who am I right now? Who am I? And what am I doing?
And who is that higher version of myself that I want to be? And would she be doing this?
Absolutely. I love this episode. It's so awesome. So we can't wait to come back with part 2 for this. So we're going to come back with some actual things that you can do in the next episode around, how can we implement some good habits? So we'll come back to you in a part 2 with this, but thank you so much for listening into this episode of Creating Connection in Health and Wellness with myself, Kirsty, and the beautiful, beautiful Demi. So if you like this episode or are loving our podcast, please leave us a review, take a screenshot of this episode, and also share it to your socials and tag us. So we'll leave our Instagram handles in the description below. So you're more than welcome to give us a follow. Let us know if you've tried anything out. Let us know, actually. Let us know what habit that you are trying to shift away from. I'd love to know. I'm always curious. We are curious.
Struggles, any struggles that you're typically having that you continuously find as a reoccurring, let us know, and we'll see what we can do in the next episode about helping you implement some strategies to fix those things.
Amazing. I love it so much.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.